Why does George R.R. Martin keep destroying the people we love? In most fantasy stories, heroes suffer, defeat evil, and eventually get the ending they deserve. But in Martin's world, doing the right thing can get you killed. Being honorable can be a weakness. And sometimes, the person you thought was the hero doesn't even make it to the end. So why does George R.R. Martin seem so determined to deny us a happy ending? The answer goes much deeper than simply wanting to shock his readers. Martin has often pushed back against the idea that fantasy should offer neat, comforting conclusions. His world is inspired by history. History rarely behaves like a fairy tale. Kings lose wars. Good people make terrible decisions. Power changes people. And sometimes the innocent suffer for reasons that have nothing to do with justice. That philosophy is at the heart of A Song of Ice and Fire. Think about Ned Stark. He is introduced as the moral center of the story. He is honorable, loyal, and determined to do what he believes is right. In another fantasy novel, Ned might have been the hero who survives long enough to defeat the villains. Martin kills him. And that's the point. Ned's death tells us that this isn't a story where morality automatically protects you. Then comes the Red Wedding. Robb Stark is young, charismatic, and seemingly destined to reclaim his family's kingdom. But one mistake, combined with political betrayal, destroys everything. Thousands of fantasy readers expected a heroic comeback. Instead, Martin gave them slaughter. And this is where his storytelling becomes especially interesting. Martin isn't simply saying that good people always lose. He's saying that the world doesn't owe anyone a happy ending. His characters live in a world governed by politics and ambition, and that makes his fantasy strangely realistic. Martin has spoken extensively about his love of history. The Wars of the Roses, for example, helped inspire elements of Westerosi history. And real history doesn't have a screenwriter standing behind it, making sure the most likable character gets the perfect ending. Sometimes the wrong person becomes king. Sometimes a great leader dies young. Sometimes the villain wins. And sometimes nobody really wins. That's also why Martin is so interested in morally complicated characters. His villains aren't always monsters. His heroes aren't always saints. Jaime Lannister begins as someone we are encouraged to despise. But as we learn more about him, our understanding changes. Tyrion can be sympathetic, brilliant, and funny, but he can also be cruel and destructive. Daenerys wants to liberate people from tyranny, yet her power raises uncomfortable questions about what happens when someone believes they're right. Martin doesn't seem interested in asking, who is the good guy? He asks something much more uncomfortable. What happens when good intentions meet power? And that may be why his endings feel so dangerous. Because a truly happy ending would require the world of Westeros to suddenly become simpler. But his philosophy is built around complexity. Even victory comes with a price. Even survival can feel like defeat. And even when a character gets what they wanted, they may discover that they no longer want it. That's very different from traditional fantasy. In classic heroic storytelling, evil is defeated and order is restored. Martin asks whether order was ever really possible in the first place. But here's the fascinating part. Martin doesn't actually hate hope. His stories contain suffering, but they also contain loyalty, friendship, courage, sacrifice, and unexpected acts of kindness. Characters can survive terrible things, they can change, they can find reasons to keep going. And perhaps that's Martin's real idea of hope. Not a perfect kingdom, not everyone living happily ever after, but people continuing to fight for something meaningful even when they know they might lose. That's why his stories can feel so devastating. Martin doesn't promise us that good people will win. He doesn't promise that justice will prevail. He doesn't even promise that our favorite characters will survive. Instead, he asks us to care about them, despite knowing that they might not. And maybe that's the real secret behind George R.R. Martin's refusal to give us a simple, happy ending. He wants us to remember that stories aren't powerful because everything works out. They're powerful because, for a moment, we believe it might. And then Martin reminds us just how fragile that hope really is. If you enjoy exploring the darker side of literature and the stories behind the stories, subscribe to Literature Literally.